Hello, I want to produce this video because no doubt this week you would have heard that there's been two major earthquakes. We've had one in central Philippines and also in Papua New Guinea as well, haven't we? Which reached 7.1 on the Richter scale and has taken a number of lives. But should we be surprised that we see a number of earthquakes today and we seem to see them increasing, don't we, and taking even more lives? Well, each year, millions of earthquakes rumble through the crust of our restless planet, and of course, most of these cannot be felt. But still, on average, nearly 140 earthquakes a year are serious enough to be labelled strong, major, or even great earthquakes. But throughout history, now these have caused millions of deaths and an incalculable amount of property damage. We've even seen some in our own country, haven't we, over the years, in the UK. But the earthquakes also exact a profound emotional toll on survivors. For example, after two earthquakes rocked El Salvador early in 2001, the coordinator of the Mental Health Advisory Committee of that country's health ministry stated, people are entering a phase of psychological problems characterized by sadness, despair, and anger. And not surprisingly, health workers in El Salvador reported a 73% increase in the number of patients suffering from depression and anxiety. And it's quite astonishing, isn't it? And in fact, surveys indicated that among the needs of those in relief camps, mental health attention ran second only to the need for water. But the story of earthquakes involves more than death, destruction, and despondency. And in many cases, these disasters have moved people to demonstrate extraordinary goodwill and self sacrifice. And indeed, some have worked tirelessly to repair damaged structures and rebuild shattered lives. But such glimmers of hope have shone through even the grimmest visions of horror, as we will see. So, what do the facts show? Well, when a magnitude 7 earthquake struck Haiti in January 2010, more than 300,000 people were killed. Now, an additional 1.3 million were rendered homeless in an instant. So, although extreme, the quake in Haiti was not an isolated event, because at least 18 major earthquakes occurred in the earth wide between April 2009 and April 2010. So, what is a common objection? Well, a lot of people say that we're not experiencing more earthquakes. It's because of modern technology. We're just more able to detect them than we were in the past. But is that objection valid? Well, consider this fact. The Bible does not emphasize the number of earthquakes during the last days. However, it does say that great earthquakes will occur in one place after another, making them one of the more notable features of this momentous period in history that we're living in. Now, just to go into that, let's have a look at Mark 13, verse 8. We'll read that for you. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in one place after another. There will be food shortages, and these are the beginning of pangs of distress. So also we can look at Luke 21, verse 11. And he says that, and there will be great earthquakes, and in one place after another, pestilences and food shortages, and there will be fearful sights, and from heaven great signs. So we see there, don't we, that it was one of the factors of the last days to have great earthquakes, such as we saw in Haiti, and the ones that we've seen this week in the Philippines, and also in Papua New Guinea as well. But what do you think? Are we seeing great earthquakes just as the Bible foretold? Well, earthquakes alone may not seem to be conclusive evidence that we are living in the last days, yet they are only one prophecy that is being fulfilled. But if we read through the accounts in Matthew 24 and such as the accounts we've just read in Mark 13 and Luke 21, we see that there's other identifications basically that we're living in the last days, and earthquakes is just part of that composite sign. Now, I encourage you to look this up in your own copy of your Bible. Now, if you've got a Bible at home, it might be as well to get this out and we'll read through it together. Or if you haven't got a physical copy in your home, then you can always use one of the online online copies of the Bible, which are usually free to read through your internet browser. But let's have a look at Matthew 24, and we're going to have a look at some of the signs of the last days, including the earthquakes that we were just mentioned. And we're going to start from verse 3, and we're going to read on until we come to the end. So let's have a look, shall we? It says, while he was sitting upon the Mount of Olives, that being Jesus, the disciples approached him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your presence and of the conclusion of the system of things? So in answer, Jesus said to them, look out that nobody misleads you, for many will come on the basis of my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not terrified, for these things must take place, but the end is not yet. So we see that another significant identification of that composite sign is wars, and haven't we seen that over the last 100 years, such as World War I and World War II, and all the other wars that have been maybe a lot more smaller than the World Wars that we've seen, but they've still taken out a significant amount of people's lives, haven't they? So moving on to verse 7, it says, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages. That's another one. Earthquakes, as we've talked about, in one place after another. All these things are beginnings of pangs of distress. And then he goes on to say that people will deliver you up to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be objects of hatred by all the nations on account of my name. Then also many will be stumbled and will betray one another and will hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and mislead many. And because of the increasing of lawlessness, so that's like another one there, we see crime, don't we? The love of a greater number will cool off. But now here's the encouraging bit. Let's have a look at 13 and 14 here, because it tells us something very significant that we need to know. It says, but he that has endured to the end is the one that will be saved. And verse 14 goes on to tell us, and this good news of a kingdom, that's God's government, will be preached in all the inhabited earth for a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. So we see from that last verse that there's going to be a global preaching work that would basically draw people away from the world and teach them the truths from the Bible. And it's those ones, providing that they endure to the end and remain faithful, they will be saved, whereas the others probably won't. So that's right. But let's just go into a little bit more about the kingdom there. It says, and this good news of a kingdom. Well, let's just have a look at Matthew chapter 6, verse 10. Well, you're probably very much aware about the Lord's Prayer, as some people call it, or the model prayer, or even the Catholics, I think they call it the Our Father, don't they? But now this is just a verse from that prayer, that model prayer that Jesus gave at the Sermon of the Mount. Now he says, let your kingdom come, let your will take place as in heaven, also upon earth. So there, Jesus again makes note of a kingdom, doesn't he? But what is that kingdom? Well, I want to show you something in Daniel 2:44. So if you've got your Bible open there, have a look at Daniel 2, and it's verse 44 we're going to have a look at. Now, what does that tell us? And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin, and the kingdom itself will not be passed on to any other people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, and it itself will stand to times indefinite. So we see there that God is setting up a kingdom, or has set up a kingdom rather, but which will bring all the other kingdoms of the world governments to ruin, and so basically crush them out of existence. And then this kingdom that God is setting up, it itself will stand to times indefinite. So you might well ask, well, why hasn't he done that now? Why has he not got his kingdom to destroy all the governments and that's it? Well, we saw, didn't we, already in Matthew 24, verse 14, that the preaching work had to be done first. So in order to tell people, to alert people about what's going on, that preaching work had to be done globally in order to save people from it. Now, Is God being slow? Well, no, he isn't. Let's have a look at another scripture. Second Peter chapter 3 verse 9. So let's have a look at that, shall we? It's Second Peter, if you've got your Bible open, and it's chapter 3 and it's verse 9. Now, a lot of people ask, well, why hasn't God sorted all these things out so far? Why, is he being slow? Well, this is what the verse says. It says, Jehovah is not slow respecting his promise, as some people consider slowness, but he is patient with you, because he does not desire any to be destroyed, but desires all to attain to repentance. That is to abandon like a sinful course, but marry up with God's standards, as it were. So that explains really a lot of what we see, what's happening in the world today, including the major earthquakes that we're seeing a lot of recently. So the facts basically speak for themselves, really, that because it really marries up with the scriptures and the times that we're living in. So if you'd like a free home Bible study to learn a bit more about this, you can follow the link to jw.org, and then you can select the appropriate link for your country for a free home Bible study. It's normally situated at the foot of the page. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Bye.